Ladies and gentlemen, we are felicitating our speaker, Dr. Angomcha Bimol Akoijam.
First of all, thank you, Manipur University Student Union and Research Scholar of the University, and Angomcha for chairing the session. You mentioned in our state different kind of responses to this report by PUCL. And you may take to this report. For today, I have picked up, this is my response a little detailed. You must have also sensed that I have written a letter to the PUCL, and they have also responded yesterday, and I'll be replying back today. And this is the first of a series of lectures that I intend to do across the country regarding the PUCL report. The purpose of today's address may differ a little bit from what I intend to do in metropolitan cities, including Delhi. So today, as I'm addressing my own people here, I'll be speaking parts of my speech in Manipuri. And those who are watching, I know many people are eager to see, especially these controversies that have happened on this report. Especially, I must begin by saying that I thank PUCL for replying to my letter, and I am ready to accept. I intend to invite them, not only here in Manipur, but also in other places, next time when I have this kind of a public engagement. Because whatever is written is in the public domain, and it must also be responded publicly, not through private communication. So what I intend to do today is, if PUCL report is the text, then we need to set up a context to understand it. I often give this example, the relationship between, if you try to understand, this is something that I often give. If you want to understand Kathakali dance and the movement of the eye as the text of performance, that is something that you are interested to decipher, then you need the face of the performer, you need the mask, you need the costume of the performer, and the characters. All of them are required to comprehend the expression in the eye. If you remove these contexts, the costumes, the face, the mask, and if you leave only the eye, you will not be able to understand fully what this expression in that eye means. So that is the relationship between text and context. The text is something that we are trying to understand, and the context is required to comprehend that text. So first of all, you need to understand, as most of you has already flagged off, PUCL is a very respected organization and very influential organizations, and they have been defending human rights, including questions on Manipur's experience vis-a-vis with APSPA and so on. Many of the members, I know them personally. And that is one of the reasons why I feel all the more disturbed. If it is anybody else who has written such kind of a report, I would not have bothered to respond. It's like the trolls on my social media. I don't normally respond to them. It's not important. But what I've decided to respond is for two reasons. Because this organization matters in our public discourses as a part of civil society. As you know, that the chairman of this jury is a former judge of the highest court in this country, the Supreme Court. And two other members were high court judges. They're renowned professors who have worked for decades on various areas in social sciences. And despite this composition in their earlier works, I kept on wondering when I see this. There are certain things that I was expecting it, and I was also hoping that they would take a much more reflexive approach while dealing with these issues. Because it is not an event that had finished. It's not like a riot which has been over, that is a crisis has been over. People have settled down, and it is a post-hoc commentary on the event. This is an ongoing part. So in that case, this report has become a part of the process of the crisis. It is not outside of it. As many famous historians would say, writing nationalist history is not outside of the nationalist movement. It is inside the movement. It is part of the nationalist movement. In other words, when we think about national movement, history of national movement, one must understand that it is part of that nationalism, that is part of that nationalist movement. This is a fairly well-known idea among historians. In a very similar sense, this report by the PUCL is not outside of the conflict. It is part of the conflict. That's the first thing that we need to note. This is not an external observation to a phenomenon. It is part of the phenomenon. And the truth of this reality is the manner in which the Kukis have responded and the Métis have responded to this. And I wish and I desperately hope that the authors of this report realize this. They are not outside of the conflict. They are part of the conflict. And which side they take, despite their self-belief, and I would suppose that I would still give them that element of benefit of doubt. I will not jump into conclusion like who financed them. The narco-terrorists must have financed them, blah, blah, blah. I'm not going to fall into that trap. That could come up later on, if required. But as of now, the first important thing to realize is that, as I'm repeating it, this is part of the conflict, not outside of the conflict. And the truth of this is what I have just said. The manner in which various civil society groups, political class have responded to it, be that Kuki politician, Kuki civil society organization, Kuki civilians, or the Métis civilians, or the Métis CSOs and the Métis politicians. That must tell them that they are not someone sitting in Delhi, Mumbai, or Hyderabad, or in JNU campus, or Delhi University campus, or in IIC, or in Habitat Center in Delhi. They are part of this problem. And they have to be aware of the fact that what they do is bound to have an effect in the entire process, including of what they're presuming to be a peace process. And one of the important dimensions in which they get implicated in this crisis is a component part of this crisis, which is the disinformation and the information, the effort to have a narrative control on what, why, how, and wherefore of this problem. They are commenting on that, whether they admit themselves or not. Major on the higher level, Iran is a key part of the reports. It's not outside of it. Now they can inariba mayam sina. Riot ama talk about matunga. Investigation happened. Tisan question na tawga. Kamay taw na talk even no had a report ang ira aga pirapanate. Sige report in the sexa when the 20 crisis is part of the way. They may not be cookies or they may not be Métis. They may be a Bihari, they may be a Maharashtrian, they may be a Tamil or anybody, but they are part of the problem. Sige problem is come way they know how to get. 20 but Iran is the important of a component. The information war. Narrative of Makanda heck over the Guinea. Iran is Kana, commanded of the Nakaran Lokanda, commanded to get no hiding contestation of a lab. which have allowed conflict to linger on. Hariba narrative control to one of one of Iran's command or no Hanamasi, Lean of what marks the Moifi Oxal of. They have also jumped into the bandwagon of this narrative war. Maduna Neba, first thing, they are ethically implicated in our crisis. What they speak, if the hatred continues, they will be responsible. If they are able to craft a peace process, they will also be responsible. Not as an outsider or a mediator, but part of the problem. That's what the first thing the PUCL must understand what they are doing right now. And I've said, might be complication. See the examples again. What is the proof of this? Is the way in which the cookies and Maites have responded differentially to their report. They must reflect on this, why Maites and cookies have responded to their report differently. That is the narrative war that has been going on from day one. That's the first thing that drags me, that this report cannot be just dismissed like any other organization doing things on Manipur. Sigi Matansda. Second important part, Akoina, Yenga Matamda. A text is produced. I say, I'm speaking in English because some of them may be hearing this because it is live stream. Otherwise, my earlier plan is to speak in our mother tongue. So I'll be mixing these two in between. I'll be writing a letter, as I've said it today, because some of their reply smacks of what I consider an arrogance that thinks that others is saying something, so we don't care. We will be just bullshitting. And I use this word called bullshitting not as expletives, accountability. There's a famous philosopher in Princeton University called Harry Frankfurt. He wrote a famous essay called On Bullshit. Liars and bullshitters are two different things. Oi the bangang when we sit in a truth respect over. I don't know mamma oi the bangangs. I took my sister in my say, oi the bangang when we sit in respect over. Do not never man oi the bangang. These are liars. They're respectful. Bullshitters do not respect truth. Behind me. Openly, they will say something. We are familiar with that. Many of this, particularly right-wing politicians and Modi government, they often bullshit. They don't lie. Because they can tell you straight, something we know it is false, they will still speak. You know, this is a characteristic of this right-wing government that rules this country. Some of the body media is exactly doing that. So this is bullshitting. It is a feature of what people call a post-truth world, where truth doesn't matter, but perception is more important, emotional component of the message and how you feel. The manipulation of your emotion, your perception matters more than determining what is truth. This is what in social science we call it today as post-truth. Bullshitting is a peculiar aspect of this post-truth world. It is exactly why our conflict, the tragedy in our state, the crisis, is all the more serious, because emotions management and perception is what people are doing. And they will be packaging things in a way that we have. I'll be citing some of the examples and what had happened over the last 2 years. So, what second aspect that we need to understand is what I'm saying is, this is narrative war, but it is a part of a perception management, a characteristic marked by bullshitting and emotional arousals. They do that, and they use all techniques to do this, to produce certain kind of a desired effect. And I feel terribly sorry that the PUCL, despite eminent scholars within that, they have committed a big blunder, according to me, and I give an example, a hint to them. And surprisingly, they have the audacity to tell me to go through the entire report, despite having reminded them that I don't have the time to go into the specifics of the report in the letter. And I will be telling you as well as them that why I choose a particular component of that one. It is part of a research methodological strategy while you are responding and analyzing the text. And I have reminded them for a detailed engagement, a public deliberation, which they have accepted, thankfully, and I welcome that, and I'm ready to do that, and which I've already told you. This is not the first occasion I'll be doing it. I'll be following this up in other places. Now, what did I say about their response? For example, I'll give you to begin with, and rest a little complicated pictures will be discussed. In their response, they said that we have published photographs of the Meitei victims as well as Kuki victims. And I would be honestly asking them, maybe I must have missed those photographs. If you have any picture of a Meitei victim in that report, please tell me the page number of that picture. And I'm repeating it here in a public gathering, not in a private conversation. This is on air, this is recorded. To the best of my knowledge, and I have checked it again, and I would like to tell them, when you responded to me that you published photographs of both the Meiteis and Kuki victims, probably I must have missed it. If it is so, please show it publicly, which page number and what is that photograph that you have shown of the Meitei victims. But the issue that I was raising is not about Meitei victim or Kuki victim, the picture. There is a slightly different arguments that I was doing, which disturbs me all the more why they did it. I'll be coming back to it. So such kind of thing, to say that when I said that there are 17 in numbers, you have shown the dead bodies, the victims of Kukis in the entire report, and not a single one. And I said, thankfully, I thank you for not showing the dead bodies of Meiteis. I'll get back to you why I said that. So we need to know that this in second narrative control, this time we have a lot of bullshitting and perception management that's been done. And I don't know whether you have this video, is it connected? I have given the organizers video clippings. I'll tell you one more thing here. So take for example, in the afternoon of 3rd of May, you see images of people when the violence happened in Dormung areas with sophisticated assault rifles. And those images, and then houses being burned down and people running away here and there, those images were flashed on social media. And I know, even though I was in Delhi, I said, what the heck? This is not the normal violence of community fighting with sticks and bamboos and slingshots and so on. There are sophisticated assault rifles. That image was used as showing that Meitei's armed men disrupting peaceful tribal rally on social media, the then Twitter, including under a particular name of a well-known writer, activist. Such kind of manipulation was there from the day one what is the consequence of that image? Is that people in Imphal particularly, that violence with the gun, what was the psychology think of that day, those of you, especially Maitans in Imphal? Or if you're a different community, think your community houses have been burned down there with sophisticated arms and mobs running amok there and hitting here, burning things, women and children running around, running away from those violence. All men saying, "No, Maitai Masanatra, come, you come, if you're a Maitai blood, come and defend." There are so many of them. You have seen those images. That creates a particular emotional thing here in Imphal. And I said, one of the first things that the government should have done, I have said this on my first interview, which was telecasted on the national level, was on 21st of May, not even a month into the crisis. In an interview that I gave to the print, I told them the government should have cracked down and made the necessary arrangement, because you should know that those images are bound to have a retaliatory violence against the other community. We were going like this. At least I was going like that. This report has nothing to speak about this. For them, it is a clear-cut violence started in Imphal, and its adjoining areas and cookie houses were burned down, and there is a retaliatory violence against the Meiteis in Canchipur. So you realize that this report, as I said, is part of that information war, whether you like it or not. So this is some of the examples. I go specifically to the other component of how to engage with these text. And I have already said these two important things, because you are not commenting on something outside of the crisis. Whatever you speak should also be very careful, very cautious when you respond to these texts. Because if you want peace and normalcy to return and justice to prevail in our state, then your response to this particular report by PUCL, you should have a very major way of, however as provocative this report is to do. But you should call it out in a major fashion. And fear no, you should call a spade. How should we analyze this text? There are certain ways which I follow normally as a student of social science when I analyze a text. As I said, text and context. And some of the ways to understand is what we often call discursive analysis, critical discourse analysis. There's another method we often use called frame theory. And each of these methods we use, and then you realize one specific pattern in this report. They said that this report is based on deputation and testimonies and so on. And how they use it, the words they use, what kind of impression they create, the order in which the events are organized, the chapters are organized. There are issues with that, and that is where I have commented and given them. I'll be sharing with you some of those critical aspects and to make you understand why this report is problematic. Before that, we also need to know that whatever is written in this text, you can't just press it aside. There are recommendations given on relief games and rehabilitations. I welcome their recommendation for an SIT, but I was asking for more than that. For me, I have asked for a JPC, Joint Parliamentary Committee, to investigate. That will show the seriousness of the government of India towards the crisis. Because the executive's actions should be held accountable to the legislature. they should be subjected to legislative oversight function. As JPC, I'm happy to inform you, including our leader, former CM Ibo, we have written on these issues to constitute JPC. So we welcome SIT, even that, because accountability must be fixed, including for writing such reports. It must be held responsible. But as a civil society group, I said that, and some people feel offended when I say, I'm not going for an FIR. What is important is to call them out and engage. And since you know that it is a narrative war, you are not responding to the PUCL's report only. You are responding to the narrative, the twisted narrative. You will lose track if you concentrate on this report only and without realizing that this is part of a larger narrative game plan or a narrative process. You will be losing track. So your ideas should be very clear. You need to call them out specifically where they go wrong. And I was expecting, and I still have, that the letter yesterday gave me a sense that the fortitude, the sincerity that I was expecting may not come for now. Because the tone and tenor of the way they wrote the letter to me tells me that they were not ready to do things. They only set up things to speak in a particular manner. So when you use, let me explain some of these issues, or what is frame theory? When you use, in analysis, when you frame something, the interpretation and the informations acquire certain specific meaning. A famous saying that I have reminded in one of my first, I think it's my first response to this report on my social media, when I said facts do not stand on their own. Some people don't understand, but many of you, that's why I said, especially our students, research scholars here, you need to know that facts do not stand on their own. There's a famous metaphor which says facts are like sacks. Bora gumari. Bora is the sacks don't stand on its own. When you put something like rice or something, then the sack will stand. Facts there, they don't stand on their own. This example you see, those of you from history, in E.H. Carr, famous book, What is History? So facts don't stand on their own. Perspective among the fact meaning acquired. Only when the facts are put within a particular perspective, then it begins to speak. And E.H. Carr famously said that facts don't speak. We make them speak for us by putting those perspectives. The facts will speak for us. So take, for example, Angomcha War, the May Tharame, in itself. It's a fact, but what does it mean? May Tharame ko yung sitabaya. Sitaba inter-community relationship tension naman manunda hapsal ladranga get the May Tharame have to give one to meaning the full form the land. May Tharame have to cut the Kaidore Anang in a Taramira, Sweramira. Mangang is another Purala, but Diarma, Temukau, and Taramale, hierarchy. It implies a very different meaning of tire burning in that gate. It is a narrative, this is a perspective which makes the speak differently. That's what historians were saying, that's what social scientists often say, that facts don't stand on their own. It is our perspective which makes them speak. So framing is like putting a perspective, and it produces certain kind of consequences in your knowing. So immediately you will begin to see women as broken face and Ainahan real movie. Very humorous reel. Mabung sinamagi machanupi mayunda lakada machanupi se mabung na gift for the loge tawga mabung sina mai machanupi se mamit nama dark spot of kham. I was black. Kana wong kin na chin bagi somebody has punched her eyes. Mabung is saw na bet the changchang the is the level ko. Mas how is na magi masen no pai ga mama is the cinema na thong je man cha thang ka ma chen pin pa se ben de se ka mai pu ma ga le framings. When you frame something as like any information, you will have a predisposition to interpret in a particular manner. That's the framing. Video Libra, Pravin Swami, video yoga. No, they did anyway, I quite see about people what's on the labor, no framing is it. When you frame something that it is, say, tribal and non-tribal, minority and a majority, then entire information events will speak differently. You're predisposed to interpret your facts in a very different manner. The facts of the events will acquire different meanings. So tribal and non-tribal, majority, minority. This is a kind of a framing that you do, and it gives you a particular direction to interpret. Subconsciously or otherwise, you will begin to interpret something different. That's framing. So when you respond to a text, you must see how this text is being framed, how it frames things. I'll give you a couple of examples from the report, and you will see the discomfort that many Maitais feel and why many cookies are happy with the report. And correspondingly, where, in that case, the writer and this text stand in that relationship. Do they stand on the Meitei side, or do they stand on the Kuki side? If the text stands on the Kuki side, why the Meitei will be happy with this? If it is on the Meitei side, how will Kuki respond to that one? So the partisanship that I was talking of it, and by saying that they are part of the problem, it is inherent in the way the empirical fact is the response that you get it now. If it has taken within court a neutral positions and trying to put certain facts and figures up front, then you will have a very different things. Or even if you think in a particular contestation, you think one is wrong and one is right. In a conflict situation, how do you go about dealing with that? That's a huge responsibility. I am not saying that neutral doesn't mean that in reality there's somebody is being done wrong too. You can't be neutral in that sense. But if your investigation on an action turns out to be somebody has done something wrong, then obviously that report writing is bound to reflect something. So the assumption that they have is that somebody is wrong, and that is why this contestation is. And how that thing is being produced is not so much because of the investigation and its truth, but the manner in which this report frames things. That's why frame theory is very important for us to look at how this report is being framed. Second, if you look at critical discourse analysis, there are manner in which the report uses metaphors, rhetorical style, the syntactical structures, the use of word, the sentence, the paragraph formations, all of that will come. And you will see certain picture gets differently produced. So these are the two tools that you will see. The third aspect which comes from this school would be something like in how the writing style. This is how we often do it, and I'll give you now, once I finish this, the premise of my engagement with this text. Adu hairakanda, kadai the combined frame of this EMC. And we will see how this report is being framed. And their choice of word, it reveals far more than what is written, and then people think that this is what is there on the literary text itself, but the manner in which these things have been organized and framed. For instance, there is a way of looking at news report or this kind of report. Inverse pyramid model, they say. The important things will be written in the earlier first page when people are reading it, and unimportant things will be just aside towards them. So it's an inverse pyramid. You will spend much more time highlighting this, positioning it up front, and you just listen it in the footnote or otherwise. And this report suffers from that, deliberately pushing something as a footnote, not using in the main text, and so on. The other one is the eagerness, the biases comes on when you use certain materials without even understanding what that material is. And you will be shocked to know this. I'm pretty sure that they may not even understand. But there is a picture of a social media comment, and they describe this as anti-cooking, without realizing that that particular comment, we don't know who's it. After all, in social media, we don't know who's it. But from the content when you read, that particular comment is saying that Meitei should stop taking cookies as poppy planters and drug dealers and or illegal immigrants. And I am saying this as a Kongsai Macha Amawena, as a Kongsai cookie. I am saying that do not do this kind of a communal taking of cookies as poppy planters and illegal immigrants. The comment says. And it goes on to say that, yes, I'm a cookie, but I'm ready for NRC. But Zablo Hema, are you ready to include Meitei Pangal and Meitei from Bangladesh? When you do NRC, then I'm also ready to do NRC and the Kaminam Yawa. And that was given as an anti-cookie sentiment represented in that post. Is it an anti-cookie statement? This post is saying that do not communalize, brand us as illegal immigrants or poppy planters. I am a cookie, and I am ready to face NRC if you are ready to incorporate Pangals, Mayans, and the Meiteis from Bangladesh or anywhere. You decide which river the cut of your, I am ready. And I will not want to run away even if I am a cookie. But do not act like a hero on social network. That word is also used. Don't act like a hero branding us as illegal immigrants and poppy planters. And that post, which was written in Roman script in Meitei Lawn, and you can see the choice of words tells you that it may not be a Meitei. Zablo is a peculiar way of asking of a particular kind. And that was presented in this paper as a report as a, see, for example, this is an anti-cookie sentiment. Do you really think that that was a good anti-cookie sentiment? Or a cookie throwing off a challenge to the others and appealing them, don't act like a hero on social network by branding us illegal immigrants and so on. With these judges and professors and others, I wonder, how come they make such kind of a blunder? You have taught in universities for decades, supervising students. You did not even know how to check this, which is written in Manipuri. You should have taken help from someone to understand what is the content of that. Simply there is a word cookie there, you think that anything cookie, that is an anti-cookie. Because it was a response to, we didn't quote Meitei revivalist radical group. So anybody who responded, there must be anti-cookie, without even bothering to check what is that comment. They published in their report it as a comment that shows anti-cookie sentiments. That is the kind of blunder that people do. We're so obsessed with a particular way of saying things. So if you look, this is a very exhaustive paper. You may be threatened, 694 pages. And if you read the way a social science student like me will read, you will take more time. So what I do is I have a first reading for a second, then I go on and I started deciphering. Third, I check with my research assistant again, is this right? Is this okay? You know, remember that part, what did they say there? So we have a brainstorming and discussions and you write it. It will be very threatening for us. And without realizing these, that's why I said, you need to know how to engage with these texts and why. I have began this talk today with the why part of it. That is part of it. It is part of our narrative work. And they are either creating problem and how different people have responded would mean different kinds of things to them. Now look at this. One of the ways when you use these things, different kinds of framing, I'll give you one example when they said the crux of this, there is 4 parallel things they have talked about. Yes, it's the first. That is, it is in page 105. It is the 4th chapter. Framing. No. Do you have that play that one? I want to show not from this report how framing is done. Once I shared this on my social network once. Aku misi dia mesti kurang hira lesmain tau isi boy na. Haga laga isa ina usa larik pao larik tama matong gaya ro kang ho no masti dia say rak po akang ket nang go video mate okay. India ki afau but analysis strategic analysis afau ay framing set mo ina tau si kamay tau dia mo. Can you have without saying it somebody can say meaning set hide the can mo hide will see framing the kamay produce so get see yen. It's ready. It's not connected. Maybe music city film the level. I'm address them. World Cup ho gaye na siya. Yeah, system is set up to already more. This is one example of how subtle way of picking out and organizing materials. Even man, framing the organized or the meanings is why I just framing the combined shape of this. This is how when they write newspapers or articles, you do that often. Yeah, the book. Let me continue what I was saying. You know, events of violence, chapter number 4 of Yaugo. You know, one of the things that I must begin with this verse. Nangi Sigi Magi chapter 7. There's a 12 chapters in this report. Asigi report chapters the Magi Matang setting the context, chapter number 1 and Manipur states there demographic report Kamaina present we guys whenever. So this is a factually error over which has a bearing. I'll give example once these things are ready. Are you ready? Same guy wrong.
Covering the grass with the ashes of centuries of burning and literature. For hours, fragments of burning paper
See, bus habagi event am tau gede na bus seller learning tau bugi do adu kandai da print ki kenoni adai da work tau ne masa mami na tiku chapa strategic analysis da India ge masa influential am mo pano magi program ne magi se March in adai de 2024 ma le hande ar magi framing se kamai ho ki mo ko I major on the Hana Hioga City, my sounds clear over the man. My high cinema. Sigi a place da. Say Karagi Mamanga, Governor Hassanaba Luando, Nampak Vega, Chi Chakugi, my anti cinema, the Fun or the Gakoi Pelliga. Gauss, Chi Chaki the Mose. I'm with my umpire. Governor will launch in one of the radical Matai Kamukrana, lively Mai Thavadi, like Maman. See the same difference. Adu Matam the man did like me, the same Maiduna. My Manasaki the Larikatali Mani, but which can't get the Tawati, new way going to see the Mai Japada. Aduna matam tu suka kita kait tau kita faham kita tu, sesuatu tu tau kena laisi dia. See the highlight was the framing is a command tau kita, destruction, mai cakiba, tradition mangiba, radical Meitei kangudu. Now second example is that even you say Meitei radical high desu, ata bumi tu nak kaya high radical or sigi, sa ise radical Meitei na tau bumi high desu. This is setting up, this is framing how you narrate. Yang innocuous or the man, but framing is already saying on and the Tagalog never. If I do press, I use social never. The pendant, Colom, the Kaikana, do no, Langa, Ira Kaikana, do not join the Bunyan Dao has. I couldn't eat Bukinam, Moga Bukimin, and Angotus and Tara, the opinion to that. Yung family upon the policy methods influence of the laser. Nang bangam the ba, nang bahai the ba, even the ba, even yawang the bangang the ba, Adumina marginalized of the exclude of the company. I couldn't a number of the banana, say feminism is to hide them. I could be feminism is to hide one every say. I could get the loyal Makata and Venus to hide. I could say, Kamamina, colonizers in I could even the Nan, so it's a no problem second one. I think it's one of the feminist lives. No passing, I could Madame Nana, but look easy to see when a palm sits in the Toguna. Don't talk later, I couldn't angle later, you know, more you do me out of Hingre. I don't know when I carry anti-colonial movement, anti-patriarchal movement, Lakanda. You speak, otherwise you will be spoken about. You write, otherwise you will be written about. I couldn't because we have been written about by them and spoken about us by them. See the shape of women. Whether it is within the parliament or it is outside of the parliament, see the public sphere is space. There is a space for the marginal way into all the country whether I could evolve like that. I see never why one of the reasons why we need to respond to such kind of a report. I don't know if you feel adagi kamay dong engage daw dito gina sa inahajere ko kanano ina ibimisi ka kanano kamay na respond daw gani makoy influence or the sector so na sa hajere changa sama daw jik daw matuka nadungang mga batay ngangi ko sa makoy ngangi isda ako'y na name calling gawe maadi adani sa mahay ba dito nang ngangi ko wado da natin that will survive because you are only attacking the person. And personalized of the more you continue, the narrative. That narrative is the target of the need and calling the Moidi Aduni, Mahdi Adani, Moya doesn't get you far. What is important is to debunk what is written. The wrong ones. If they are good ones, we say this is good. If you have committed some wrong, we must tell them this is wrong. Adugi framing dugi I couldn't events the Kamina constantly national media that like framing the single report is part of that one. The narrative or the framing in a particular way, one lot of mayam say, which is to do PUCL possible to respond to say it is to the narrative war. It is that narrative controlled to be better than anything else. Just see, this is a renowned person in the national media.
For hours, fragments of burning paper drizzled on the perfectly manicured lawns of the Raj Bhavan, covering the grass with the ashes of centuries of learning and literature. 2 decades ago this April, activists of a movement seeking to eradicate the Bengali script from their homeland with matches and buckets of kerosene set fire to the Manipur State Central Library. Estimates suggest some 145,000 books, some of them priceless manuscripts, were lost in the arson. No one was ever caught or punished. Libraries are a small, even trivial loss compared to the lives lost with brutal violence and the ethnic cleansing Manipur has faced since 2023. Yet, the burning of the library offers an opportunity to reflect on the forces that engendered the ethnic warfare and consider how they might be engaged and finally stay.
Panibra second example, the Misi, the Kanana Tomo is Panibra. It doesn't make sense. But comparisons are too over. Amadu should my target mangi, do Kanata Sopagi, do a domain of the 100 PCD, like Kamangi, do get Antinicus, Nisi, by yawing at 20 Iran say, must it come out of the investigate of the Carmine on the different elements, Kamita, you have a forces in the there, Nana the Haita, the Aquamasima Pai and hiding. But when the framings the already aside, the radical in the ties of 2 events, Heisenberg in Amana Pusinga, the lower than Samaina implicit manner, the Wahi Kuzin of a Mawong, the way you organize your text, the manner in which the words are being used, informations are being shared, Sigi Port Mayam I could be Sigi takes a power of the line by line, facts by facts kind of because once you understand and the facts don't stand on their own, it's a peculiar way of organizing that, it's a peculiar way of presenting them, your choice of word, the manner in which the text is organized, all of them you need to understand when you respond. Okay, you know, tell us factually incorrect ones. It's a trap. Not every factually incorrect ones doesn't matter, but there are some incorrect ones which have repercussions. But far more important is facts that have to give a narrative style with the say, for example, in this report, factually wrong. They said there are 36 scheduled tribe communities in Manipur. One might ridicule that, oh, you are doing a work on Manipur, even you don't know how many scheduled tribes are there in Manipur. You don't know, you said that there are 36 of them. Actually, there is 34. You might use in a rhetorical style by saying that you don't even know how many scheduled tribe communities are here. But that is not as a profound thing as the other mistakes that they make. The blunder that I have given you one example of social media report. And the man is this that you need to know mind organize how is chapters the detail to the 12 chapters. Epilogue so happy. Mamang executive summary and the Chapaka, the main content body is at level. So, was it Aina putting a sticky framing sila? Was like 4 parallel to this is in page number 105. Set up the rating as events in the minor narrative of the NGO. We did a lot of work. No, I set up the sit up. When you say tracing the event side, you're trying to trace the event side. Iran sekarang anda hore I hai bisa. Again, perspective of Changin. Say when you trace back the events, the Second World was a kamai hore and another through Romatamda. Treaty of Versailles they hold. Hitler coming to power they hold Natraga policy the border the Germany Enoma Retunla Sexing Mama outpost of the sea river spark of the day Loguribra. Or Japan war Manipur Matamda will count it when the field commander of the Burma sector, the Ladina Lada Sekoi movement of the Japan military headquarters, the Ibu de Warsha, when Logoribra, Tozona Low with decision to meet the Logoribra, Natraga, Nasaki, the actual troop movement or the river dam of the Chapagi tragedy, Matamogi, food supply, Kopama, missing the Kautagi, the Turena, the first tragedy struck out of the Japan war when it's on the Kumatamda. Are they Hogoribra, Natraga, the first fire? Exchange of fire in the war. How do you write when you trace that event? There is always a choice involved with your researchers. Depending on your theoretical perspective and your purpose, you will be choosing it. That is why modern social science tells us that the researcher is independent and observer the dichotomism. Every truth is historically and culturally situated. Every researcher must have a reflexivity to reflect on their assumption, their bias, their background, their ideological orientation. Or even in social science literature, Dr. Michel Foucault, you ask question A, not question B is determined by an episteme. The framework of your question framework, I'm going to knowledge the framework, I'm going to guide around here, but that you ask question A, not question B, I will determine over already knowledge system, I'm going to I must see the episodes, the assumptions, I say, how to reflect over the research over I must be aware of my biases, my assumptions, and the reasons why I'm choosing this topic to do research, why I'm asking a particular question. You should have that clarity, and that's probably what is the concept called reflexivity. My first response, I reminded them, if you have done that, you will not do this. Now, Magi framing how events, I'll give you an example. Magi says that there are 4 antecedents to the violence of my immediate context of PD. One day in the over. Eviction and forceful demolition of private villages followed by protests organized by ITLF. Second, Maris no frame to investigation. The Maris the man of the choose of agitations, protests, and advocacy by Meiteis demanding inclusion of Meiteis and Meitei bundles in the ST list. Third, protests against the violation of the reservation norms in the recruitment at Dreams. Sigi national policy reservation, the director started waiting again when he was the director. There was a negotiation with the striking students. Mayam Sigi Adugi, precedents in violence. Case Sunzang village to eviction and forceful demolition. And fourth, in the protest meetings and advocacy by tribal groups opposing the Meiteis, the tribal demand of the Togo Marida. Asida Toga Salia the Mana, main Oina Kaisi Siki, Haiba, Marise, Masida, common trade in the Singis, Nasagi, STD, Posina, common frame of many higher. Objectung Antoine Canabada, Masi. Connecting them, must get threats in the connector is STD distribution high. This is called frame. This is how you try to organize the sequence of events. Second, Magi can you say? Eviction is it? Eviction is a case Sunzang village the agitation man aside first of all the narratives of the man sees frame among Tana the game independent of that frame game Manakari Heisla. reports in page 107. This incident must be understood in the context of the allegation that there is increasing illegal migration from Burma and Bangladesh into Manipur. The demand for strong administrative action against illegal immigrants was made mainly by the valley-based groups, and a number of Naga groups joined them in the demand for implementation of NRC. Highly reported, Masi Sina, Sigi context, and Yemadabani Senior. Eviction report. Sonzang Village, eviction, what is that? Accusation of illegal immigrant, Aduni, high report, NRC, this is debate. Masi context of the Yenadam, other than Hapsala Yenadam, they have never somehow. Other get hold of whenever study. No illegal behind acquisition or victimized or not when now supposing if I position the eviction in case of Zang Village, instead of this frame, if I use revenue department, forest department, the official forest area, the revenue pisa number, pisa number, government, chief secretary, secondary, chief secretary, chairman, or the committee, same akanda, revenue department, the forest department, the confusion between forest department and the revenue department in order to resolve that thing. Another committee, same akanda, survey, or akanda, chumtok bohona, pagi part, amani na chat rakanda di. Nasagi Sonzang Village the eviction. It acquires very different meaning. Kamaina Pagis in it. This is what the importance of framing is. What they have said clearly in 107 is that the eviction of Sonzang Village must be understood in the context of the allegation of illegal migration. If we choose to look at this event called the eviction process in case of Sonzang Village, under the broader confusion between the forest department and revenue department, because some of the protected forests and reserve forests are dark citations, and I know the revenue department says because of some corrupt official have done something, so they are trying to clarify it's not specific to case of Sonzang Village. It was carried out throughout the state of Manipur, especially Nasaigi reserve forest valley. Now, if you read this event in Sonzang Village under this framework, then you begin to realize that cookies are not the only ones who got evicted. Maitais also got evicted with a huge number. I think cookies in the government circular report, it says only 59 of them. I just must be having the data here. Say, out of 413 encroachers evicted, 59 encroachers were cookie communities. Maitais 143, Pangas 137, Nagas were 38, and Nepalis were 36. So, Kuki, the victimization of Kuki, the narrative would have not acquired that meaning if you change the context of reading case for Sonzang Village eviction. But is it factual or is it infactual? Sonzang Village, the eviction, is it a fact or is it a fiction? It's a fact. But that fact won't stand on its own. If you read it as they demanded that it must be read within this allegation of illegal migration, that particular Sonzang event, case Sonzang Village eviction, will acquire a particular meaning. But if you look within the larger effort to, negotiate and correct some of this confusion that existed between two government departments called Forest Department, Revenue Department, and case Sonzang Village eviction acquires a very different meaning. But what did this author do? They chose this one. So they are implicated in the reality they produce. The reality doesn't exist out there, outside of their frame. So, eviction, is it eviction a fact or fiction? Factually incorrect, or they tell us if it is factually incorrect. So that's what I said, it's a trap. It's a fact that eviction happened there. But the kind of meaning that it acquires in this report would be different if you choose a different dimension. to analyze this. That's how this report is. Now, strange as it seems, amada sumukari haigeda siki port mayam se moina analyze over deposition testimonies of the people, newspaper report, documents by the tribal organizations might be able. Sigi ID research campus na staple daw na pwedeng tuwing sa laman ito. Ano na mo na parang tuwing sa laman ito. Ada na maning di ako ngayon, mamang di ako ito kasi piyesa mo tungan hape. Ayun siya haisa na isikin, mo na kahagida. We base these narrations, evidence where do they collect this narrative to build up this source in the it includes government circulars and orders. Sonjang Village incidents in the government, they said that they rely on government circulars and orders. But I have some of these circulars issued by the government of Manipur, both a clarification on this Hon'ble incident or otherwise. Nasai talk about government, all the orders and others, you don't find this in this report. Why? You said that you will be relying on the orders, which is in the public domain. On that incident, they don't choose. See, it talked about circular, just a clarification from the Forest Department. Even this was, I was told in a newspaper, you see ministers clarifying this. In government orders and circular, these official documents, they don't mention. Why? Because it doesn't fit the narrative they want to tell. Factually incorrect, if it is factually incorrect, tell us. They haven't told us. It's a trap. Sonjang incident happened. You said it happened, so I can't say it is false. It happens, but the meaning that it acquires is because of a particular framing that you have done. And so much so that despite saying in your own report that you will be using documents and orders and circulars of the government for its clarification, you know, used of them. Why? Isn't it biased? Pick and choose. You're doing that. Now, Magi Nasagi, victim of the tribal crisis, let me turn to the choice of the word my answer. You will see right from the beginning when it kicks off. They don't understand. There is something called primacy effect and the recency effect. It's a well-known psychological finding. People tend to remember what was presented at the beginning and at the end. In between, you tend to forget. Human tendency is that you tend to remember what was presented to you at the beginning or at the end. The same thing happens in lecture. Aduna nekoi public speaking was asked training the management at the beginning of my career. Early 90s or management top salamus. See, is it combined up when help only on the memories of Hanga Haikari, one on the side post be by the tower. Cover the article in the super heading, the Maratama heading, the Sam Hapser, it becomes something like a new beginning. And attention is in the water in it. There's a technique. I'm going to come up 1 hour speech. So now let me turn to this one and hide again. You are kicking off a new beginning, so the attention of the people is drawn. See, primacy and recency effect of the text. Mama on the reports said that's what people will remember more, not what you write in between. So that is why I cannot take your executive summary as an innocuous, average version of the report. Because that is where your motive is also reflected. Because you know that when you write that executive summary, that's what most people will remember. In that, the kind of word that you use, the way you have explained the phenomenon, is what is problematic. That's why executive summary is an important part. Don't say that, जो constitution में article number 1 से शुरू हुआ है उसे करो. I want the like पाव है ऐसे फसल पाव गए ना अनुंगा. I want the PUCL di ngasai ki primacy and recency effect di local pani manung na suning ngasai ki reason mana manung ki example में हमने ngasai की कल इसमें. Mo ki क्या साथी के the arrogance ने हरे से नो. ओसा वो लगा नहीं जही कुंसा है ना ताला बम दल ले आगा. I want the nato na mimit kui guy bigi type ra noi to lai sai bam power. Noi ne kari kham du lu guy patronizing wo do man. It was only man let's try to the system your we request you to read in detail. I am reading and giving you examples more within. But you must also know your motive is reflected in your executive summary. Because you kicked off, you set off. This is like the right-wing WhatsApp University does. They will say something wrong about it on WhatsApp, spread the news. The moment you try to correct it, the research have shown it. 10,000 number of videos the correction 25% information. So misinformation continues, disinformation continues. You say, I should now vote give an example. When Amit Shah was giggling in one of his leaked video, during the election, they have this disinformation campaign that Mulayam Singh Yadav ka masana pa kupang thani. Vote katan manang lasala kaganda. Ani kay no Samajwadi ki machim now if some Mulayam Yadav and Akhilesh Yadav no slapping. Then I said, magi workers singi confidence mang denye. Some way to BJP na. It's spread out. Adu ki leak video ni is still available on YouTube. Adu kay daw lagi to what happened? Jo karna tha, jo kaam jo karna tha, wo to kar diya na hai. Ako'y napangalaw result to the pang, ako'y napamsa ko po to the pang na now kung siya na may confidence mahangi, ako'y tawag to the hari. Even if it's wrong. So that is what, even if I made it wrong, then what they're going to say that we are part of this game of narrative setting up. That's why Cookie are supporting us. That's why my takes are against us. I am saying this. This is what the attitude is. If you do that. Aduna, executive summary the thariba potuga, both the executive, I'll give you 1 or 2 examples of how that setting is not only in the executive summary of the report, but it is also inside the text. I just read out the executive summary, the first 2-3 paragraphs, and you can see. You see terms like Nasagi, what you say is a konalaki, man, Nasai violence, a kamai holocaust, such a miracle, used or I am seeing you. Tribunal presents overwhelming evidence of targeted killings, destruction of homes and places of worship, sexual violence, and forced displacement of blah blah. It describes the emergence of ethnic enclaves, mass looting of weapons of police armories. These are seemingly facts. These are facts. But what, how, and wherefore, the sequence that you have presented. See, they used the provocative state action, ST declared the resistance, choice of word. The moment you said that the decision of this High Court was provocative, is it provocative to the Meiteis? Is the decision of the High Court on ST, does it come as a provocation to my taste? Please tell me. It is no. So the moment you have defined the judgment as provocative, you're already positioning yourself on one side. This I learned as a basic when I started my research work. You use the term secessionism. When I interview people, many of them said, why are you calling us secessionists? We are a national liberator. We're a freedom fighter. The moment you use the secessionist movement, that means you're taking a particular position. You're looking from a particular dimension. So the words are not very neutral. So provocative actions, instead of saying, like there's a hardcore that less work, tension between the two communities, then you are objectively saying something, right? But the moment you keep on using this qualifying word, you have ample example if you do that. These are sometimes we forget that this meaning doesn't make much sense. But you are already revealing your position. As I've given you example, when the feminists say something like this. Who says that cooking is sole work of the women? It can be done by the men also. But my husband is very good. He helps me in kitchen work. The term helps. You're reproducing the old belief that this is the work of the women. So when you choose a word, you produce as an inherent meaning. See, the way the language is used, the sequence, there is the manner. So if you are looking for factually incorrect, again you will miss. See the choice of the word, how this report has done. And I said that is why one group in this crisis is happy with this report and another group is not happy. And they think that they are non-partisan. Now look at this. I'll give you framing this. I'm coming to choice of word. How the words are used. Inside the text, they write determining, violence. Kada ida kamay horoki aba violence ay koi masi sigat pa matamda ne yang wise ni mana repost nice. Anyway, I'll just read it. The way this papers is organized by my people is all messed up. Please, number 2, inside the text, how and where the violence began, which group instigated it has been an extremely contentious question. It has been difficult for any non-partisan report and even experts who testify to the tribunal to ascertain the accurate chain of events. How and where and who instigated, this is a very difficult and contentious thing to say. This is what they write inside the text. Page number 161. And what they do in their executive summary, which is something that people will remember. What did he say? He said, mob rampage to Kuki settlements in Imphal and nearby areas. In Canchipur and Kangkokpi, retaliatory violence emerged against Meitei homes and properties. This is an executive summary. Anybody who reads the text, which is likely to be remembered portion, has this. And you have said something like it is a very difficult, contentious thing to say who instigated, where and how it started. It's very difficult to say and so and so. But you make a categorical statement. I'm repeating, categorical imperative sentence. And they said this is an extraction of the text. How did you come to this conclusion? And present it in your executive, and you brush it aside. This is not a general statement, this is an extraction. Are you playing with game? Who's fooling whom? Extraction from what? And you think that we don't know that what is recency effect and what is primacy effect? And if this is not a conclusion that your report has done it, why did you conclude it in your summary? Chain of events. Then the other word, this is not easy. If you are trained social science, then you will understand that critical discourse analysis, how to read the text and how the reality is here. Look at this line. Another thing that was said inside the text as well as in the executive summary. I'll give you another example. Kukizo communities were driven out of the valley. Compare this with other expressions. Meitei communities left tribal-dominated areas. Driven out versus left. What is the difference? Driven out is somebody have forced them. And they left. Meitei left the hill. And the Kukis were driven out. This is exactly in the earlier studies on the media. We found that, this guy was killed and 3 Meitei died in firing. Who killed them? Oh, this attack, there was a report that we have analyzed it. So, Kukizo communities were driven out and Meiteis were not driven out. They simply left the tribal areas. Is this neutrality? You are already constituting what is the reality. And Sinamuk, inside the text, is a repercussion is really nice. This is in the executive summary and this is from inside the text, the chapters which they ask you to read. What they say, look at this. The Imphal Valley and its surrounding district is closed to entry of Kukizo community. It's closed. They were driven out, they are closed. This is inside the text. And what happened? And come to Meitei, he said, road passing through the hill areas are bare to the Meitei community. Lambi sa kaya ni hayo kato ni Meiteis are barred from traveling on the road. Whereas in the Imphal Valley and surrounding district, those guys were stopped. They were closed the door. I said, open up that weekend. Okay, highway to nahi ja sakta. We got to go on highway. But can we go back to More and settle down there or in Surachandpur and anywhere? That's how the world has been played out. Left, driven out, closed, and we cannot travel on highways. It's not only about traveling on highways. Highways are, Kukis also the same thing. They can't travel on highways which passes to Meitei areas. Just as the same portion of the highways Meiteis cannot go, which is under the Kuki areas. So they said the districts are closed to entry of Kukizo community and road passing through the hill areas bare to the Meitei community. And there are interesting examples like this. Valley district became Meitei stronghold, patrolled by armed groups. The other expression, Hill district became Kukizo stronghold. Samai. Meitei stronghold, Kuki stronghold. The difference is the qualifier. What comes in? It says, inaccessible to Meitei police and politicians. Are they trying to hide that this is equally inaccessible to the civilian Meiteis who have been displaced and linguistic in very camps? It's not only the police and the politicians. What are they playing with us? Are they neutral? Look at this word. Hill district became Kukizo stronghold, inaccessible to Meitei police and politicians. Does it mean that the civilians is accessible to those areas? Similarly, Valley district became Meitei stronghold, patrolled by armed. Why don't you say Valley district became Meitei stronghold, inaccessible to Kuki policemen and politicians? This armed man is one of the key drop of the narrative throughout this debate. Let me remind them, I have no love or respect for the wrongs done by the government, both in Delhi and Imphal. At the same time, any ex-migrant armed groups, be that in the valley or the hill, for me, I know whose role and what, but I will not pick and choose to blame one and the other's silence. In my assessment, I have raised the issue to them. What is the role of the Sioux in this problem? Just as you talk about these armed groups in the valley areas, there's a frequency analysis. I'm not going to it. This is part of textual analysis. You can do how many words have been used and in what context, which qualifying word are used, and how the meaning is shaped. That I'm not going into the detail of the textual analysis. That's for a different engagement. I'm just giving you glimpses on when you learn to do this. So, remember that we left and only politicians and policemen are inaccessible. Of course, I do get access to the Pagawchoy Kai, Makale Kai Bazaar, which is also called Kambay. I'm a politician, so it's okay. But I am saying that why here you turn it, and in the other one we talk about armed groups. If I frame, Hill District became cookies of strongholds with ISIS type of masked men and armed men parading all the time in the city areas. If I say that, what happens then? These are the narrative one. I was expecting some people who are not part of the conflict here to give an objective assessment and see where things are going. Instead, they have put fire to the problem again. Now people started changing in for or against this report, and they are enjoying it. A report which should have avoided that one if you have the sensitivity, without display of words, the way you frame things. If you have an objective, they should be ashamed that in a crisis which smacks of a conflict between two communities, one community appreciates you, other don't. This is a problem that they should realize. And I'm giving you why these differential responses are coming in. Now, the other part that they have mentioned, this is, I think I have more or less covered, except for the worst contentious issue that they have. This is also a very interesting part, because they continuously produce like this. You read this report and you will see, I'm just trying to give you to, especially the research scholars and my colleagues, when we read the text and why we should be responding, what is this text position is. I wanted to give you about what the issue that I raised with them as my fourth point. First of all, you must realize one thing. In this narrative, though they said they didn't conflate, that particular epilogue, they are saying, you're picking up, they reproduce the entire paragraph. What they don't realize that I was reading that paragraph as the part of that chapter and how you have framed for the cookies, you write, and for the Meitei side, that is where I was reading, where the introduction of a paragraph line and elaboration ends, and another idea was immediately introduced within that. There's a textual analysis. They are making a mistake on that. Betrayal. Betrayal of what? The promises are not kept. What promises are you talking about? Betrayal is what? When you have a contract and understanding, that is where the word betrayal is used. So what is implicitly you are insinuating? Now the last point, I raised about the use of photographs, and I told you that there is a dead bodies. And what is strange, these are very well-known scholars and judges. The Global South scholars have been worried about the manner in which the dead bodies of Asian Africans are used in Western literatures and media. During the coronavirus, dead bodies floating on the river and lying down here and there in Africa and India was shown. But when the white men died, or in the European people die, they respect the dead bodies. They don't show those pictures. And recently in this, another civil war-like situation in Africa, the same thing happened. And there's a heated action between journalists from Africa, research scholar from Africa, countering New York Times. Similarly, during the coronavirus date, lot of Indian scholars were pointing fingers at European literatures. Why did you show those images? You're not showing to our dead bodies. This is nothing but racist Orientalism. You treat the other body differently. You have a double standard. You have a different way of dealing with your own body. Can you check how many times they have done this during the Delhi riots or in Gujarat? It's worth reflecting. And when the Westerners do to Indian case, you protest, calling them as Orientalism and racism. And the same thing happened with us. You don't say anything. What is the response? They said, well, it is in the public domain, and some of them will use it because the family permission they gave us. I wonder whether those research scholars trained in the best of the institute in this country and abroad, from my fellow Kuki community scholars, do they agree with this kind of a display of bodies? Or is it so twisted a political motive that showing those rustic picture is a vindication of one's own narrative? And it will generate hatred and dislike for those who committed that crime. Is it a move to reduce peace and normalcy, or inciting to sustain the hatred and anger? Do you think that those images is going to give a good feeling? And you think that by publishing those photographs, you are going to bring normalcy and peace? I must remind them this. When I was making my film, Angomcha Bimol, in 2003, some of the images that have landed up on my desk in the editing table. One was a young boy who was shot dead, blood oozing out from his head side, dark, thick blood on a stretcher in the morgue. And another lady who was brutally raped by two Union's armed forces personnel in front of her disabled child. And it seems that after the rape incident, these two sepoys went away. I think these two were convicted later on, these two army personnel. When that picture, when the neighbor comes and then perhaps those journalists who went there, they have a video recording of her mouth frothing. She was shaken out in this frothing mouth and screaming, and that picture came up on my editing table. I was working on this film, Angomcha Bimol. It's about how Manipur and the tragedy of the armed conflict and how this violence and human rights abuses have happened. But I said no. My team members say, oh, let's use it. That's just what they have done. Let's use it. I say, no, I can't make that. I can't make that woman's pain a spectacle in my film. If I saw this boy, what will be his implication? He's a dead boy. He's lying in silence and peace. Let him be. That's why UN protocol, Geneva Conventions, even legal parameters, human body is treated very sacredly. Habeas corpus in Article 32. If you look at the theory in political philosophy, you will know that the body is a very sacred object. In law, in war protocol, We have seen in this crisis abuse of those ethos. I have constantly reminded, we come from a community who had written a text called China Road. There's an ethical war. We must protect our Ipanat Ipunan. This is much before Geneva Convention. The same etiquettes, respecting the dead bodies. Now they say that they get the permission from this one. It is in the public domain. I am asking, no, it's your ethical responsibility to think whether to publish or not publish. The fact that you have published that to 17 in number without any other picture. I said, thankfully you have excluded my take victim's picture. I thank you for this, because you respect the departed soul from my community. But still, those people who died are part of my society. Even if they are not part of my society, these are human beings. That is the ethics. Now, if you have failed yourself by saying that I choose, because the permission will be, this is in public domain, will you produce it? It is absolutely unethical one. And next time, then those Indian scholars and scholars from the South who have argued about how the dead bodies have been printed, they must condemn this aspect and this lame excuse. This is exactly the way I wrote in the letter also. The same thing New York Times has reported, and how many of the scholars and journalists criticize these people. And they said, that's what I said, this looks like bullshitting. To kya kar loge? We have published it. What is our intention by publishing those things? Or those who want them to be published? Selling bodies, dead or alive, to serve the cause, to strengthen a particular narrative. Is that what you're trying? This is how we are victims. This is how we've been slaughtered. I can understand that motive if you are part of this crisis. But if you are a conscientious ex-jurist, professors, I expect them to think thousands of times before printing those things for two reasons. For not only this ethical question, but also the fact that this will fuel emotion. We sustain those emotions. One of the things that I'm worried about our present conflict, unlike 1990s of the crisis in the hills, many of these brutal images are captured because of the smartphone. So the memory is not going to be here alone. It is going to be fossilized in these electronic gadgets. And when they popped up, there is a special challenge that we will be facing it. Memories is going to be reinvented again and again and again and again. That society has become different because of the invention of this internet and smartphone. We all know in social sciences, the society is not the only society. We don't live only in physical society, but we also exist in our virtual world, which influence our behavior and thinking. And one is thinking about how to deal with these images. You blatantly publish it, and you explain it away, the ethical implication as well as how it contributes to this conflict, by saying that this is already in the public domain. What is this argument? An intimate moment shared between two lovers. Once they broke up, this particular man has uploaded that image and the girl commits suicide. Will you reproduce that video again saying that this is in the public domain? Will you? Even when the parents of that dead girl gives you this video, will you still publish it? That's the question. That is what I said, racist Orientalism. Not only that ethical question, it has a direct implication for the violence. You want people's emotion to run high. You want people to fight over your report. That's what is this reporting story. There are a lot of factually incorrect ones in between as well. I have given you one example. In fact, two. There are others, but the greatest tragedy of the report is the manner in which this information is framed and presented. And once I have shared with you this with you is because, unfortunately, how we respond to this. Then what I wanted to share with you is this. The thing that I started off, this is part of the information war that we have been facing, is part of the conflict. You have series of these information war, distorted, campaigning, making one community as victim and another as, all this word that used in this report, majoritarian, and this government, that government. And one of the areas where they have failed, look at this. Government of India's response is called ineffective or ineffective response. If you have listened to me throughout these last 2 years, I said it's not an effective response. I have said in 2 ways. Their inaction itself is an action that aggravates this. And I said they are complicit in this problem. But they have reduced the government of India's role as inadequate, ineffective response. Oh, they did respond. Government of India is benevolent. They respond, but ineffective. I said their refusals to contain this violence for 2 years, despite having so many security forces. They are talking about accountability of security forces. They generously use Assam Rifles deposition. This is the last part which I have written to them. These testimonies and deposition, how do you use them? And your choice of deposition is what creates a different reality. These depositions, or whether it is factually incorrect, is not important. They will say that is what the Assam Rifle officers say. That is what the Meitei victims say. This is what the Kuki victims say. We have nothing to, we have just kept what their testimony says. They're trying to bluff themselves. So I will give 2 examples for them as well as for all of us. I'll give you one from the partition studies. The women committing suicide because they are afraid the other community will dishonor them and the community's honor will go. And some asking their father to cut off their head and so on. That narrative, well-known feminist Urvashi Butalia once dealt with us. And she said, should I give these testimonies independent of any intervention? And she said, no, I can't do this. Because that will lead to a particular perspective. You position it, it will acquire a different meaning. So what they think that the patriarchal framework, you eulogize those women. You say, look at the courage to save our honor. Then these feminist scholars said, what makes you think that your community's honor is in my vagina? This is what the feminists started asking it. Why I should eulogize those little girl who says, father kill me before they rape me? This is a peculiar way of defining female sexuality under patriarchy. And I will be supporting that oppressive ideology if I eulogize these people committing suicide. That's a peculiar feminist take. So said, I will not leave these testimonies independent of my interpretation. I will say that this experience, I interpret it this way. Under this frame of feminism, I'll be upfront about it. So you can't, when you're dealing with this kind of a crisis, by saying that we have given these testimonies. There is another issue. How many numbers of testimonies are used, in which sequence, and how you organize them is another matter. This takes me to the second aspect. Satyajit Ray, the well-known filmmaker, once he wrote a beautiful small piece called On the Question of Reality. He said, what is the relationship between feature fiction film and the documentary? He said some people define documentary is based on reality. And he said, I don't like this distinction between fiction films and documentary on the basis of reality. Because he says, the reality of the drunken men or the white beater that we saw in the Fisher films are also found in reality. So what do you mean by reality? And he says, the documentary filmmaker will be pick and choose his frame and then they will organize in a particular sequence. We know this act of organizing these different shots will create different meanings. It's just something that we are familiar in cinema. So imagine a film, imagine a picture, a child playing on the grass, and the second shot is a snake on the grass, and third there is a man with a terrifying looking man coming and looking down like this with a knife. These are three different shots. You change the sequence, you create different meanings. Child was playing, the snake is shown, then this man comes with a knife, then you think that this man is going to set the escape from the snake. Instead, if you saw the child, the man and the snake, the snake will all likely become a symbolism of the man who's going to kill the child. So in the manner in which you organize your materials, create, this is also well known in historiography. The narrative truth. In history we say reality is when the historians link these events and put the perspective, then the very act of narrativizing itself produces the historical truth. This is well known, arguments by Head and White. So in that sense, saying that, we have testimonies and then deposition, the manner in which were presented and freely used. The example is, this is my last comment in the chapter on media. Easy Eye, they generously quoted Easy Eye, which was already been contested, including in this book that we have done. Do they care to look at it? No. Kyo? I'm coming to what the chair has said at the beginning. Before I wind it up, when they said, they're just given the testimonies. These are real facts. But the manner in which line them up, the choice of those images. Say, in documentary filmmaking, I'll give you another example, how the same reality that happened, if I choose a different picture, the meaning comes differently. Think about protesting students who are blocking the traffic. Police beating them up, and you said, protesting students beaten up by the police. Now, in the same sequence, you see one ambulance got stuck there and one is struggling on life and death within that one. If you include that picture, then you will begin to sense an insensitivity and the problem of that protest. In that film, you don't incorporate every picture. Reality is captured through that frame. So which picture you decide to incorporate, which not, this report even includes people who have been part of this disinformation game, who have been spewing venoms against one community called Metis, who doesn't even live in India. What makes them to choose him and his testimony to inside of the film? But if you look at some of the features, say tribe. If you're a tribe, go to jungle se relationship hoga. Ye adivasi wala jo emotion. With your categories, this violence, this crime, they come and share and talk. Instead,
and how the national media has in fact changed the entire norm of reporting, whether it is a reporting or an editorial comment. They would blanketly say a community, a cookie, their credibility. Once again, I shouldn't be thanking you all because there is a person who proposed a vote of thanks. Personally, I thank each and every one of you and personally Professor Bimol for being with us. Thank you.